Hello, guys. David Vose here again. Well, I'm having a good day. It's a beautiful, clear skies. Last night, I went out because I got so many other things to do with the dome and stuff, but I had to wait 3 days before I could go back in that dome while I'm letting the floor dry. Today, I've already got the stovepipe in and stuff. But last night, since I couldn't go in and work, I went out and started digging on the well. And old buddy, I got down about 6 feet, 7 feet, and I've just got to dig it out bigger, and I'm going to go down another, as far as I can. But it looks like I'm going to hit water because already the soil is just like mud. It's wet down there, real wet. So we'll see. But I hope you're having a wonderful day where you are. And yeah, we got some really interesting stuff for you again. It just keeps happening, and I don't know if this is going to be a trend. I think so, because it's been going on now for a while. But I just got a lot of stuff I want to tell you about today. It seems like I think there's probably a lot of certain people that might think, well, Dave, you don't ever talk about our tribe. What you talking about Greeks and Europe, but what about us Africans and Chinese and us down here in Mexico and stuff? I mean, aren't we somewhere in the Bible somewhere? Yeah. And I have talked about some of that. Some time ago, I've done quite a few videos on Africa and some places, but you see, I guess um, there is a little bit more excitement in some of it that we've been going through that goes up into Europe and stuff because they seem to be I don't know if they're the good guys. They're more of the bad guys than anything because they seem to have brought idolatry and they went after, I think we could blame that all on Dan. Dan sounds like he might have been white, and he brought idolatry with him and he went all over the world, and it seems as though he conquered them. And since he brought with him a seed of Judah and a royal line, he proceeded to use the biblical law of Yahweh to enslave everybody and genocide, and that's what's been going on. So I wouldn't be jealous of this Germanic tribe or the Vikings or whatever they may be. But, I am trying to get to the whole story. So we've been talking about the Greeks and how that went from Sparta and down to the Romans. We've talked all about the Roman Empire. Now we're talking about the Greek Empire. And I want to talk a little bit about the African people as well. Because, you see, the Bible tells you that Abraham got up on a mountain and he looked in all directions, east and west, south and north. And the Lord says, in every direction, not only that your eye can see, but wherever your foot will tread. And think about what that means, that little phrase, look east, west, north, and south. It's so easy, isn't it, to just read something like that and say, well, let's say that just means this little bitty land of Palestine. Well, he wasn't even in Palestine. He was at the Nile. And that was Abraham. And, of course, from that point forward, the children of Israel, well, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Joseph went down into Egypt. And for 500 years, after he brought his father and his brothers down there, they were in the land of Goshen, which is northern Egypt. And they were the lineal pharaohs in Egypt for 500 years. But let's just really think about this expression, east, west, north, and south. If you were told, now listen there, Dave, I want you to stand there on that mountain and look east and west and north and south, and everywhere that you can see, I'm going to give it to you. And as far as your foot can tread, well, I guess if the Lord told me that, I'd get down off that mountain and I'd start trekking. And I would traverse the entire world and it'd all be mine. But that is a likely scenario since if the Lord just said, look, I'm just going to give you this little piece of land over here on the west coast of the Mediterranean or the east coast of the Mediterranean, the Jordan Valley. He could have just said, I'll give you the Jordan Valley. He didn't say that. Specifically says he was at the Nile. And none of it makes sense unless what he's really saying is, as he does in all of these beautiful parables and, inspired utterances, east as far as you can see, west as far as there is, north and south, the entire world. This is the center. And Abraham, and this goes along with what it says, you're going to be a father of all the nations. A multitude doesn't just mean, 12. It means all the nations. Now, Abraham's promise didn't just stop there. That exact same promise was given to Isaac, a multitude of nations, and I will bless you. Though I think it's very unfortunate the way the Bible translates things. We see the word many sometimes in the Bible, which isn't even actually the word many. It's kind of interesting because in our language and our concept and our world that we live in, our culture seems to be one culture. I don't know how they feel in China about these things, but most of the Europeans and South Americans and most people that I, have ever spoken to, I haven't really talked to too many of the Chinese people, but everybody that I know of, we have this concept of forever, infinite, that kind of thing. But the Bible doesn't use words exactly like that. The Bible uses words like an age, which is a definite period. Funny how we don't know how long an age is, but the Greeks and the ancient ones knew it was 2,000 years. And the Bible actually says that. But the Bible uses these concepts like ages of ages. And so that's an indefinite period, but it isn't literally forever. And the reason why is because nothing really does last forever. I mean, you can't be the same. If you are always the same, it's going to get pretty boring. So nothing lasts forever. However, we do exist forever. Existence is forever. But things keep changing. We keep growing. We keep learning. And so you can't say that we're going to live forever, because what if there's something better than living? I know I'm being, kind of facetious, but I'm saying, what if the word living, we find out, doesn't even really mean being? It just means getting through it. We're getting through things now, but one day we're going to start living. What if that's a different kind of concept? But the point is that we're not living yet when we keep dying, and our mortality means that we come to an end. But we as a being don't come to an end, just our life as it is. When the Bible uses the word many, that's not really the word in Greek. It's an opposite word of the one. You've got the one and then you got the many. Now, if you say it that way in English, you realize you're not talking about an infinite necessarily. It's just a complete opposite of just the one. There's many more than just the one. It's complete opposite. Now, the reality is there's only the everything and the nothing. Those are the two extremes. The nothing is just a concept so that you can understand that everything actually exists and nothing doesn't. The ignorance means a lack of any knowledge, and knowledge means all the knowledge. And really, many and all, in many cases, is the same word. So that is why in Greek, since they don't have the word infinite, they use little phrases sometimes. So that's why when we get to Revelation chapter 7, it says, I saw a great multitude. Now, if you left it there, it could be everybody, or it could be just a lot of people, but not everybody. So they clarify. They say, well, this is a great multitude which you couldn't even number. Innumerable. Innumerable is a very similar word to infinite. In other words, it's impossible to number. It doesn't mean that you can't find a human that knows how to count that high. That's not what it means, because what if you found some genius or got a computer? Is it possible to count that high? Maybe not. Maybe not even with a computer. You know why? Because maybe it's infinite. And that's what it means. It's impossible to number. This is everybody, because all the children of the Lord are going to be saved. That's the whole game here that we're playing. We're all just going through life, and that which is immortal cannot become mortal. And every one of us are immortal souls, because Adam, the first man, they breathed into him the breath of life, and man became an immortal soul. I know in your Bible it says a living soul. But as I've said before, living, again, is one of those opposite words. Or non-living, and there's living. And living, the nature of it, means it doesn't die. It's living. It doesn't mean it's temporarily alive. It didn't say that Adam got temporarily awake. It means he became conscious. He became a soul. And he had life. In fact, the word there, right in that same sentence, there's another word there that's actually a plural. He got living, he got lives. And we only translate it with just life. Some words are like that. They're a plural, but we don't put an S on them in English. You know, life or lives. We do it in English, but in the Hebrew, you don't necessarily do that. So Adam had immortality. Now, Adam was cut in half, of course, and once you do that, now you've got mortality, because you have the infinite cut into that which is just the illusion and the reality. So Abraham was told, I'm going to give you a multitude of nations. Well, back to Revelation. It doesn't just say a multitude. And then it goes on and describes it that no man could number. And then it says every nation. Okay, how many nations are there? Well, I don't know. It don't matter. All of them. And every tongue. Well, that's a lot of tongues, right? A lot of languages. And I'm told there's at least 200 nations on the earth right now, and a lot more languages than that, and dialects. And every people, every nation, tribe. So in the nation there may be several tribes, and in the tribes there may be various languages, and in the language, how many people? Now that's not people in the sense of a nation. That's the sense of persons. Every person. So it describes that everyone will be saved. It also tells you that when the Apostle Paul says, just as in Adam all die, so in Christ will all be made alive. So you see, we're all going to be made alive. And alive means to be fully alive, to be immortal. And of course, we've talked about the verse also that says that Jesus died for the sins of the whole world, but especially for those who believe. Now, why is it that he died especially for us? Because we're going to receive a lot of benefits from believing. But even those who don't believe, he died for them too. Because one day they're going to believe. Why? Because we're going to preach. We're going to tell them. And they're still going through the way, along the Milky Way, along their journey. Now, Abraham went up to this mountain, and the Lord said, Abraham, out of your loins, I'm going to make a multitude of nations. Okay. That same promise was given to Isaac. Great. That was his son. Then it was given to Jacob. Oh, great. Now Jacob's got the promise. Well, what is it? The Lord's kind of selfish, just giving it to this one guy? Well, no. Jacob had 12 sons. Oh, those are the 12 tribes. And every one of us, because there were 4 women, 4 colors, everybody is included in those 12 tribes. And it says that 70 souls came out of the loins of Jacob when he went down into Egypt. 70, according to all the esoteric wisdom, is all the nations. It tells you that in Deuteronomy 38, 32:8, I believe, or something like that. In the Septuagint version is the best place to read that there. There were 70 nations and 70 deities, and a deity for every nation. This is why you have 72 on the Sanhedrin, because they rule the world, all the world. But now one of Jacob's sons, well, one of them was Judah. Now, as we said today, Judah wasn't the firstborn. In fact, he wasn't even the firstborn of the right woman. Remember, because his favorite wife was Rachel. And that's the one through whom the promise will come. The same promise given to Abraham, Isaac, and then to Jacob will be given to this child born of her firstborn, which is Joseph. Well, Joseph had a coat of many colors, and they didn't like him because he had a vision that said that all the stars, there's 12 stars, and 11 of them bowed down to his star. He was going to be the ruler. Going back to that selfish racism thing, right? No, because Joseph had a coat of many colors, and Joseph was a bough or a sprig, a vine that was planted by a well. It's going to grow really big and have a lot of fruit. Well, where was he planted? Oh, he was taken to Egypt and planted in Egypt. And from there was the Exodus. And the Exodus is where they went 360 degrees around for 40 years. And 360 times 40 is 144, you see. And there came out 12,000 from each tribe, along with a great mixed multitude. And that's the whole world. So Joseph was planted at Heliopolis, where he became Pharaoh, and then he grew up over the wall. He went over the wall. He was planted by a well and went over the wall. He was separate from his brethren, it says, and he became a fruitful bough and filled the earth to the ends of the earth. Okay, the ends of the earth is not in Palestine, I guarantee it. Wherever Israel was, it ain't there. It's somewhere beyond the wall, and he's going to bear much fruit, and he's given the promise. The stone that the builders rejected is going to come from him. And it turns out that Joseph, they sold him down into Egypt. And he became the king. Well, yeah, but they're up there in these little Israelites living, and they got their own king, right? According to them, that's all you need. We don't want no stinking Jesus. We got our own king up here, right? We got our own Messiah. Well, I always say, if you ask a Judean why Jesus could not be the Messiah, one of the biggest reasons they'll say, well, his mama was a prostitute. He was born out of wedlock. He's wedded some kind of priestess, some whore. He fails the test. He can't be the Messiah. He's a blasphemer. He calls himself the divine being. And everybody knows we recite the Shema down here. And he doesn't like anything we say, and he counsels us, and he teaches us things that we don't understand. Well, so ask them, well, who's your Messiah? Oh, our Messiah is coming through Judah, right? He's going to be of the lineage of Judah. Wait a minute. Didn't Judah sleep with Tamar, the prostitute, the Canaanite woman? Yeah. Isn't Solomon and all of your kings and King David and everybody, aren't they all from the prostitute woman down there, the Canaanite woman? Yeah. You see where I'm going with this? Oh. So your king, your Messiah, whoever he is, if he's of the line of David, he's going to be from Canaan. He's going to be from a prostitute, isn't he? Oh, yeah. Not only was Judah having some hanky-panky with the Canaanite woman and produced the line of the Messiah, but so did your prophet Joshua. What? Yeah, when you went into the promised land, you wiped out all the Canaanites. Well, you wiped out some of them, but when you went to Jericho, there was a woman in there, a Canaanite woman. Her name was Rahab, the harlot. Oh, yeah, she was a harlot, and she was a Canaanite. And Joshua married her. Yeah, and your king and Messiah is from a harlot, isn't it? Oh, yeah. Oh, and not only that, you surely know or believe that the Messiah has got to come from the line of David. Yeah. Do you know that he's got to come from the line of David and Bathsheba? That's where Solomon came from. And did you know that Bathsheba was a woman from Sheba? And did you know that in your Bible it says that David raped her? Did you also know that Moses married the Ethiopian woman? And the Levites that officiate in your temple are all a bunch of Ethiopians. Huh? Yeah. Did you also know? Oh, I don't know. I think maybe we should spare you the rest of the story. Maybe you just go look it up yourself. But the reason I bring this up is because Abraham gave the promise of a multitude to his son Isaac, and Isaac gave it to Jacob. But Jacob didn't stop there. Because you might have heard, if you did have a Bible and never read it, that Jacob had 12 sons. And he did not give the promise to Judah. That was only one of his sons. And he did not give the promise to Judah. Did he? No. Jacob gave it to the one son who was Joseph from Rael. And Joseph you rejected. And he's the one who went down into Egypt and married Shechem, the Canaanite's daughter. Uh-huh. Now, hold on there, Dave. Hold on. Hold your horses there. I got a question for you. Are you telling me that the promise from El Elyon given to Abraham, who said, I will make you a multitude in the earth and bless you, are you telling me that that was given to the Gentiles and not the Jews? Huh? You mean to the Canaanites? Those people you hate and you tried to exterminate? Oh my goodness. I think I understood what you said. You said that the Almighty told Abraham, I'm going to bless you. And then Abraham gave the blessing to his son Isaac, and Isaac gave it to Jacob, and Jacob did not give it to Judah, but he gave it to Joseph, who was separate from his brethren and married the Canaanite. Yeah, that's what I thought you said. Whew, man, I can see where that would be pretty darn hard to find in your scriptures, even though it's glaring at you right in your own face. And you rabbis have been trying to figure all this out for a long time. I bet you already figured that out, didn't you? So when you tell people that Jesus is not the Messiah because he's born of a whore, you're just lying, aren't you? That's what I thought. Well, here's the thing. Not only did the promise go to Joseph, but that other promise that went to Judah, I want you to go back there and read it again. Your Messiah's got to come through the line of David through Judah, right? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, did you know that Judah came from Leah? Did you know that his mother's name had the name Yahweh in it, Leah? But Rachel had the name of El. And guess what? Jacob loved the child. His favorite wife was Rachel. But Laban did some shenanigans and switched the women, and he ended up getting the other covenant first, the Yah covenant. And, it'd be one thing even if Judah was even the firstborn of Leah, but he ain't. He's just a baby. He don't deserve none of it. He ain't the firstborn. He's just a baby. You see, you know why he's a baby? Because he ain't learned anything yet. Well, I mean, the firstborn was of Leah was Reuben. And then I think Levi and stuff. I don't think Judah was even the secondborn of Leah. But he's kind of last in consideration. And I want you to read the prophecy again. Because Jacob sat down and blessed his sons, and Moses blessed all the tribes as well. And we saw the prophecy about Joseph. But what is the prophecy or the blessing that was given to Judah, actually? It says, Judah will have the scepter. Oh, that's it. We rule until. Did you read that part? Until he who has the legal right comes. And if you will use your noggin on that, you'll realize that Judah doesn't have a legal right. He's only temporary. Why? Because that's why we got the book of Ruth. Ruth is the story of the Melchizedek priesthood and the line of El. And there was a man named Elimelech. El-Melech. Melech is Molech. Melech or Lamech or Amalek, those are the Canaanites, the Amalekites. And Abimelech is Abi, father of Molech. And Abraham made a covenant with him, an eternal covenant. But back to our story there in Ruth, a man named Elimelech and Naomi. Naomi is just kind of a slight variance in the spelling of Naamah. Naamah was the daughter, the great-great-granddaughter of Cain that got through the flood because she was Noah's concubine. And Ham slept with his father's wife and started the Canaanites. Well, Naamah then is the great Canaanite princess. The woman's seed will come through this woman, Naamah. Now here we have Naomi, same word, just spelled slightly different in English, but it's the same word in Hebrew. And she's married to this Molech or Lamech or Amalek or whatever, and Elimelech has no heir. The Melchizedek priesthood's done. This happens so many times in the Bible. That's why Elijah had to go raise up the widow's son. That's later on. But here, Elimelech had 2 sons. And one of his sons was married to Ruth. Well, both of them died, and Ruth didn't have any husbands. They didn't have any children. So Ruth is out picking grain in the field, and she's comes across this guy named Boaz who decides to marry her and raise up seed for his brother. Well, Boaz is of the lineage of Judah. So Boaz just temporarily is raising up seed. The Judahites are temporarily raising up seed for Elimelech or the Canaanites. And this is the line of Joseph because he married the Asenath of the Canaanite line. We know this for a couple of reasons. 1 or 2 of them we've already mentioned, but the other reason is because we know that the Messiah's got to come from the line of David, and David was the son of Jesse, the Ephraimite, which is of the tribe of Ephraim, who is of Joseph, who got the promise. So King David, everybody's got to go through David. David goes back to Joseph through Ephraim, not through Judah. Only he counts the seed for a period of time through Boaz because he's having a Levirate marriage to raise up seed for Ephraim and Joseph. And Joseph was separate among his brethren and married the Canaanite lady and became Pharaoh, or the king of the world, of the Gentiles, not of the Judeans. Again, or Joshua, as we said, married Rahab the harlot. This is constantly happening because we're trying to get the seed back, the rightful heir. And we're trying to unite the flesh with the spirit. Cain's line, which is the earthly, carnal, and the Seth's line, which is the more spiritual line. And this is also symbolic of the flesh and the spirit. Man and woman, all the world. So Judah is not only the youngest, he's not of the right covenant, he's not of Reshel, but he's of Leah, and he's only a temporary holder of the scepter. The one who has the legal right, of course, is Joseph, who is from Dinah. That's the woman. Jacob had 12 sons and 1 daughter, Dinah. And Dinah married to Shechem, and they had a daughter named Asenath. And Asenath is an Egyptian deity that is supposed to be the creator of all. Yeah, Asenath was an Egyptian deity. She created all things, including Ra and Atum, which are 2 different parts of the same being. And it's spoken and retold over and over in Greek mythology and so forth, but of course you Jehovah's Witnesses and you evangelicals don't want to read anything about history, so you wouldn't know that. But this promise of a multitude of nations isn't given to Judah. And so there could not be a way on this earth or in any other whereby the Judeans or any of those individuals over there in Palestine today could be the heirs. They're only temporary. And Jesus said, your house is left unto you desolate. I have other sheep which are not of this fold, and them also I shall bring. So one day there will be a stick of Ephraim, and which is Joseph's son, and a stick of Judah, and they shall be one in thine hand. Now, Joseph Smith said that is the Bible, which is the stick of Judah, and the other holy scriptures, all of them, including the Book of Mormon, and all of the other Egyptian writings, because he even interpreted some of them, the Pearl of Great Price, which has the book of Moses, the book of Abraham. And Joseph Smith said that all the nations are going to come back and be restored in the latter days. And the restoration will happen by means of recovering their language and their scriptures. And that will be the stick of Ephraim, who is the multitude of nations. Because in Joseph, who wore the many-colored coat, every nation will be blessed. Now, that means everybody, because everybody means everybody. So when Abraham was standing on the top of that mountain, which, by the way, as we've shown, the only mountain there on the Nile where he was is the Great Pyramid. And that was the outskirts of Heliopolis. And that was the mountain of the Lord. That was Moriah, which the Egyptians in their language have, to spell it, they have an M and an R. And it's also where we get the word Mary. And in Greek, it's still Mary or Martha, and it means Lord. So Moriah, or Zion, is also called Mount Zion, which represents the whole top part of the earth, all the land masses of the earth. And the center of all the land masses of the earth is Heliopolis. Now, I said all that because I want you to remember what we said yesterday. It was an interesting little statement that we made, and I neglected to add something to that. We talked about the fact that we have two cultures or histories that we seem to be more favorite. We follow all the time. We have the Bible, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the 12 tribes and all that, and we all know about that here in America. Most people around the world have heard the story of the Bible. But then we have the Greek mythology, which most colleges and everywhere you go around the world, you go higher learning, you're going to learn some of it. Even in grammar school, you learn a little bit about Troy and the Greeks and so forth. Well, we also mentioned that if you know all or any of this stuff, you will understand then why we have a great pyramid on our dollar bill and why there is an obelisk in Washington with a little pyramid top and a little obelisk top. Now, the funny thing is that the other architecture you find there is that Vatican-style Capitol building. It's the same that was there in Rome. It was called the Capitol because it was a place of decapitation, because it was the place of the skull. But if you look at every major, I mean, we're not just talking about America or Italy, because the Vatican looks like the Capitol building here in America. But if you look at London, if you look at Constantinople, if you look at the Dome of the Rock, the Muslims, everywhere in the world, the capitals, which are temples, they're all temples, are all domes. And by the way, you know, there was, I think, something like 900, or is it 9,000? There's a large number of cathedrals, Catholic cathedrals. Do you know that those Catholic cathedrals were already there when the Catholic Church came along and dedicated them to Christ, Jesus, and the saints? Because all those statues used to be named like Persephone and Zeus. The statue is Zeus. They just renamed it, put a different plaque over it, and said that's Peter. Or, well, actually, it was this statue of Jupiter, and they renamed it to Peter. And all these cathedrals that were pagan cathedrals are now Christian. Now, that doesn't mean they're wrong, because people don't know what the word pagan means. It means nation. And they don't understand that Christianity is not Judean. We're the nations. And this is the other side. We worship the mother. The Jews worship the father, or the male. And this is why there is Athenian architecture in every capital in the world. And right outside the front door is an Egyptian obelisk, just as there is in Washington. So we have Athenian and Egyptian, the male and the female, the ben or the vagina, which is the dome, and the phallic symbol, which is the obelisk. and they go together to make a kingdom. Now, here's what I wanted to tell you. The dome has on the top of it, there's a little, let's use the technical term. It's a clitorius. And the dome represents this vagina, the woman, the female. And as we said, the woman represents creation and the galaxy and all the universe, a swirling vortex that we all come out from the womb. And so the Vatican, or the Capitol, is the big building, and that's where we worship, and that is the mother. But next to that is the male symbol. Now, where did we get the male symbol? The male symbol we got from the Judeans. And the true Judeans, we don't get no obelisks from Jerusalem. What we do is we get them from Heliopolis, and that was the true Judeans. That's the male, the lineage of the pharaohs from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The female, the Virgin Mother, that is from the Greeks. And the Greeks always, in their temples, worship the female, whether it be Artemis or Dinah or Diana. They worship the female. Now, Yahweh didn't like women, and he was the brute force, the hunter, the male. He was angry all the time, and he made up all these laws, because he was kind of ornery. Maybe he had a little too much testosterone, I don't know. But he wanted the women to be in subjection. And he refused to, remember we were reading the other day in the book of Jeremiah, describing the worship of the female, where they used to pour out their drink offerings to the Queen of Heaven. Back in the day, we were worshiping our mother. Everything was good, and we didn't have nothing bad going on. And now that we're worshiping you, we got all these disasters, and you're killing us, and you're angry, and you're wrath, and all of that, and we don't like it. So, remember, we've been under the patriarchal system for a long time. I'm not saying I believe in going back to a matriarchal system at all. I'm saying we need to become one. I'm saying we don't need to rule over each other, but subject ourselves one to another, as the Apostle Paul says. And Paul says, just as the woman is from the man, because Adam was formed first, Yahweh cut him in half and made woman. But then Paul says, in reality, neither is the male without the female, or the female without the male. We got to have them both. Because just as the woman is from the man, so the man is from the woman. Because every woman gives birth to the man. So we all come from her womb. So, in the end, we're going to have the divine wedding. This is what the Bible's about. The groom and the bridegroom. Remember, 3rd chapter of John, there's a great wedding in Cana. By the way, Cana is the word that we have today, cannabis. But there was a great wedding there. And at that wedding, there were 7 water jugs that were purification jugs of the Judeans. So they were water. There was water in that purification jug. Now, what do you do with water to purify yourself? Well, you wash your body. Okay, that's the outside. That's the male. That's the lesser. But Jesus turned the water into wine. Now, instead of using the water to wash your body, they drank it. And it turned out that it was a purification of the mind. It was not just wine, but it was spiked with honey that was made from the daffodil. Up in the regions up in Syria, they would have honey bees that would get their pollen from daffodils, and it would make psychedelic honey. And that's a fact. You can look that up. The honey would make you higher than a kite, and you would see the Lord. And they would put that in their Holy Communion, and they spoke in tongues and spoke to spirits and discerned between the good spirits and the bad spirits, and spoke in the tongue of angels, glossolalia, which is something that they did at the temple of Artemis and Dionysius. And as we said, Dionysius is the Greek way of saying Elisha. El, Isa, and Isa is Jesus. And Elisha went up there and got rid of Baal worship and started the school of the prophets, which is up at Mount Carmel, which is up by Tyre and Sidon. Now, that's where we come in the other day talking about the witch of Endor, and we went through that and found out it wasn't a witch at all. It was a woman, and she wasn't a medium, but she simply was a prophet of the true El. And so this is what we've been talking about, is the uniting of all the nations. And the temporary kingdom of Judah, finally, the line of Perez, being wedded to the woman's seed who is of Canaan, and that will be the great wedding. Now, that means that even though these individuals rule now, when Jesus came and said, I'm taking away the keys of the kingdom and giving it to them who will produce its fruit, he wasn't saying he was giving it to Christians. He was literally saying that the Judeans were of a particular bloodline. And he gave the keys to Peter. And Peter was called that because that means Pope. Peter's actual name was Simon, son of Jonas. And so Peter became the Pope, and that is the Pontifex Maximus. And that's what we have today. And this goes back to Julius Caesar, and it goes back to Alexander the Great, and it goes back to Troy, and all the way back to what we've been talking about. However, this group of individuals, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, or whatever, always married the Aphrodite, the African woman. And so Cleopatra was a woman who spoke the Egyptian original language fluently. And this is probably why you hear Greeks saying, oh, she didn't look very pretty, she looked swarthy. Well, she was quite beautiful because she had a complexion like you wouldn't believe. She was mostly a black woman, and she had the most beautiful eyes that you've ever seen. You've seen it in the movies, you know, with Liz Taylor and stuff like this. Everybody knows she was the most beautiful woman that ever lived, but she wasn't actually a white woman. And so this is, you read the story with Moses marrying the Ethiopian woman. They just couldn't stay away from her. But was it really love, or was it destiny? Friends, it was destiny. The woman's seed, she will be the one who will bring forth the reigning Christ, and that is Jesus. So Jesus' mother was a black woman. His father was a white man. And all peoples of the earth are peoples that the Lord loves. Now, why don't we talk a lot about the Africans? Well, we don't talk a lot about the Brazilians or the Africans or the Chinese or the Japanese, but they're there. And we have mentioned that the Japanese have the Shinto and the Indians have the Buddhism, and all of these were religions that lovingly provided by our Heavenly Father. They are actually higher religions than these Judeans. We got to follow these Judeans and find out what they're up to, because they're the ones that have the scepter at the moment. But when the young child Joseph finally comes back and regains his power, that will be the Christ in you. Now, that child will be a child with a coat of many colors. And that's why here in America, we have the Constitution. And this is what prophecy says, is there will be a great ensign that will be standing in the latter days. And all the nations shall flee unto it. And that is America, friends. So I want to tell you a little bit about some of the children of Israel that fled to Africa in this one. And we're not going to be able to go through all the stories and stuff, but just a little bit so that you understand that we're including everybody in this, and we're all going to have eternal life and immortality. Now, Kingdom of Judah in West Africa. Wow, what a handsome man. Doesn't even look very African, really, in that picture. So I'm not really quite sure. Did they snap that with a Polaroid, or is that just a painting? Probably just a painting. So we'll just disregard that. The discovery of the 1747 map of the Kingdom of Judah in West Africa in 2012 has caused quite a sensation. With the exception of the Limba, general history provides no indication that black Hebrews might be found in the sub-Saharan Africa. But in 1747, British and French mapmakers started a Kingdom of Judah in West Africa. Some scholars say that the name bears no significance to the biblical Judah, but there is considerable evidence to the contrary. The presence of Hebrews in Africa is generally traced back to the siege of Jerusalem in 66 to 70 AD. R.L. Windsor says it is estimated that during that period of Roman rule from Pompey to Julius, 1 million Hebrews fled into Africa, fleeing Roman persecution and slavery. Ella Hewley agrees that the 66-70 AD Roman-Jewish War marked the peak of persecution and the end of the original Hebrew Israelites as a nation. Hewley says, Israelites who managed to escape their persecutors during the war subsequently migrated to West Africa. In West Africa, Judah is bordered by the Gold Coast, Ghana to the west and Benin to the east, and is situated within modern Togo. It has a complex history, the result of colonization by England, France, Portugal, and the Dutch, and domestic conquest by the kingdom of Dahomey. In 1725, Judah has been designated as a town or kingdom with multiple names in many sources. Although Wuda is the spelling of the town's current name, it occurs in European sources between the 17th and the 19th centuries in various other forms. In English, Wuda, in Dutch, Fida, in French, Juda, and in Portuguese, Ajuda. Colonial cartographers had renamed Judah the Slave Coast, when it became the primary slave port in West Africa, stretching hundreds of miles from the Bight of Benin to Gabon in West Central Africa. Even with this name change, the view that the name Judah does not enter the historical records until 1671 or 1673 is opposed by Elise Reclus, who in 1888 states the Europeans have designated by various names Afida, Huda, Wida, Uda, the region ancient authors called Judah. The inhabitants were called the Judaic, quote, and indeed they were regarded as a remnant of the lost tribes of Israel. Those ancient writers Reclus is referring to are the Hebrew authors of the Bible. Now there's the map there in Africa, and you see the kingdom of Judah or Wuda Slave Coast. And there's lots of names down there. There's even a place down there called Jerusalem. Evidence that Judah was inhabited by the descendants of Jacob, who were subsequently deported during the transatlantic slave trade, can be found in the written testimony of Aulaudau Iquano. He was captured at the age of 10 from the former Biafra, just above the desert of Seth. Olaudau wrote of the Hebrew customs practiced by his tribe. They have many offerings, particularly at full moons, generally 2 at harvest before the fruits are taken out of the ground. And when any young animals are killed, sometimes they offer up part of them as a sacrifice. These offerings, when made by one of the heads of a family, serve for the whole. Some of our offerings are eaten with bitter herbs. The Judeans did that on Passover with bitter herbs and the unleavened bread. Alaudau's Hebrewism is also evident in his name. We know he is from the tribe of Judah because of the suffix Uda, for Uda is present in Alauda. It is now common knowledge that the merchants and slavers knew the exact origins of the people they took captive from West Africa because they recorded some of their names. Yahweh, girl. Yakoba, boy. Hey, Yah, man. Yehweh, woman. Hu, Yahweh, woman. Yehovah, woman. Yiwa, man. According to the Portuguese slave records, their names were not constructed from terms such as Lord, Jehovah, Elohim, or Adonai, but were variations of the name Yahweh, proving that they knew the real names of the deity of Abraham. South Ghana, Nigeria, and surround Nigeria. The land of Judah, or Wuda, was described in 1793 as being beyond description for beauty and description, and was so populous that one village contained as many inhabitants as the whole kingdom on the Gold Coast. The history of the people who lived in the slave coast, Judah, has been subject to historical distortions, but identifying the geographic location from which the dispersed Hebrews would return is not difficult when the Bible confirms it. Prophesying the return of the ancient scattered Hebrews, the Most High says, "From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my petitioners, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering." Zephaniah 3:10. Africa was at one time known to the ancient world as Ethiopia, and the Atlantic Ocean was called the Ethiopic Ocean. Now, we've talked about this, and I have mentioned this quite a few different times. We've done videos about America being Zion, and they will bring the Lord's people unto Zion as a present. They will be a people peeled and terrible from their beginning. Here's that verse I was referring to. It's Isaiah chapter 18. This is King James. It says, "Woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia." Now, we've talked about this before. This is not about Ethiopia as much as, I mean, it is. We'll cover that in a minute. But the land shadowing with wings can be taken two different ways. If you look at North and South America, it looks like an eagle with two big outstretched wings. Some have pointed that out. I don't know if that's what it means. I do think it has something to do with it, because it's a land with outstretched wings in some translations. However, it more likely has to do with the fact that our country has this emblem of the eagle. The true, real meaning of it is the feathered serpent, which is what you have down in Mexico City, and it's the land of Quetzalcoatl, the Enochic land, as we said, the land where Enoch built the city in Mexico City. But it extends to the south and to the north, and it's the land shadowing with wings. It was by divine providence that the United States still has this symbol of the eagle. So it's referring in that sentence to America. So what's this part about beyond the rivers of Ethiopia? Because America is beyond the ocean of Ethiopia, which, as we've said, that's mistranslated. It's not rivers, it's ocean. And they originally used to call that entire area of Africa Ethiopia, and it's the ocean of Ethiopia. So the land beyond it, which is what we know is Atlantis, which is beyond the Atlantic. That's another name for it. And that sendeth ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the water, saying, "Go ye swift messengers to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden down, whose land the rivers have spoiled." Now, the nation that has been trodden down is the children of Israel, mankind. We're all suffering. We've all been trodden down. We're the children of Israel, and we were scattered into all the world. And so many of the indigenous peoples, or all of the indigenous peoples of the world, are the nations of Israel, various tribes of Israel. And we have been scattered. Who are scattered but Israel? Israel was scattered. And we were peeled. I don't even know if that's the correct word, but let's not, go too deep into this. A people terrible from their beginning. That's Israel. It's not referring necessarily just to black Africans, but it is referring to Israel, wherever they are. And it's a nation, which is Israel, meted out, trodden down, whose land, whose land? You see, this is our land, America. The rivers have spoiled it. Now, it could be talking about the area around Egypt, or Goshen, where we originally were. Remember, Joseph went down there, became the Pharaoh, and they lived there for 500 years in the land of Goshen. And that's certainly a land where the rivers have spoiled. There's so many different rivers flowing, tributaries and branches off the Nile. But I believe this has to do with America, because we are so blessed here with these beautiful rivers and agriculture and lush. Because I believe it, because it says of Joseph, he'll go over the wall and he'll be fruitful, and to the everlasting mountains. This phrase, the everlasting mountains, I've described it before, refers to the ring of mountains that go all the way around the world. And many have said that the Rocky Mountains are a main part of that, where the children of Israel went. Now, I believe they went to all of the eternal mountains. The eternal mountains goes all the way around through the Philippines and, Japan, and all the way around the Bering Strait through Alaska and around. So it goes all the way around. And right in the middle is Heliopolis. So we went to Galilee, or the circuit. And our land that prophetically it speaks of is the opposite ends of the earth, where we're going to be scattered, which, is east, west, north, and south, but we all eventually get gathered in America, and an ensign is raised up in the latter days. You'll see that here in a minute. It says, all ye inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, see ye when he lifted up an ensign on the mountains. And elsewhere it calls it the eternal mountains. And when he bloweth a trumpet, hear ye. Now the trumpet is the last days when Christ is getting ready to come. We need to fast and pray because we need to go through the days of judgment, which is what we're about to go through. And at that time, in the last days, the ensign, or the Constitution of freedom, liberty, and justice for all, Mother Liberty, will be raising her torch and saying, come and give me your tired and your hungry. For so the Lord saith unto me, I will take my rest, and I will consider in my dwelling place, like a clear heat upon herbs, and like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. There's the harvest. This is the harvest of the world. For the harvest, when the bud is perfect, the bud of what? The bud of the planting of Israel, as it says in Hosea. It says, I will plant them in all the world, east, west, north, and south, even the land of Sinem, which is China. So this is everywhere. But all of these are gathered eventually into a place where he raises up the ensign at the top of the mountains. There's a certain mountain that he chooses. We can't go through all the book of Psalms to show you that this particular mountain, Mount Zion, was at the ends of the earth, pretty for situation, the glory of all the earth. It was in the days of Atlantis where Adam dwelt. But it says, the sour grape is ripening in the flower. He shall both cut off the sprigs with pruning hooks and take away and cut down the branches. Okay, that's the judgment. When Christ Jesus comes back to trim the branches of his plantation, which is all of us. And it says, they shall be left together unto the fowls. That's the wicked when he returns. Unto the fowls of the mountains and the beasts of the earth, and the fowls shall summer upon them, and all the beasts of the earth shall winter upon them. And in that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts, a people scattered in Peel. Okay, so these people will be brought to Zion. They'll be brought to the land with outstretched wings that the rivers have spoiled, beyond Africa, beyond the ocean of it, the Atlantic. And this is Zion, where he raises up the ensign. And he'll bring these people who had been scattered, all the scattered Israel, including Africans, Chinese, Japanese, Europeans, and everyone in the world will be brought. A people terrible from their beginning, which is Israel, a nation meted out and trodden underfoot, whose land the rivers have spoiled, that's our land, America, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, Mount Zion. That's where we're going, friends. And we've talked about this. I don't want to go too deeply into this particular prophecy, but I just want to share with you that that is probably the best interpretation of that prophecy. I have mentioned the African slave trade as some who have put that forward as an interpretation. And I do believe that it's a big part of the interpretation, since we're not talking about Africans. We're talking about just what I've always said, Israelites. Children of Israel were taken captive. But the road along the way was long. They didn't all just go from Palestine to America. They went from Palestine to Assyria, to Persia, to Media, to France, Spain, Africa. And as I've said, Atlantis was the original home of Adam. And this return to Zion is really talking about going to America. It says the Atlantic Ocean was called the Ethiopic Ocean. Subsequently, it has become evident after so long that one convert objective for slavery was to remove the Hebrews from their lands, and so cut them off from being a nation. Also, it's interesting that Spain was for centuries until 1492 confederate with this area called Judah in Africa. And we've talked a lot about Timbuktu. It used to be a saying when I was a kid, if you wanted to get something, you had to go to Timbuktu to get it. And nobody even knew where that was, but it's in Africa. And it's down there in this area called the Slave Coast by Nigeria and Ghana. And it was a huge temple. It was a huge temple. It's still there today. And they had great libraries, and Muslims and Christians and Jews lived there, all in peace. While up in Europe, above where France and Spain meet, that was all Europe. And they were all sitting around arguing about how many angels sat on the head of a pin. And they forbade you to do this or that, or, anathema, and, making paper bulls and executing everybody and demanding this and that and inquisitions. Whereas the Muslim world, which owned most of the world, not just little Europe, all the way from Spain down through Africa, all the way around through the Middle East, all the way to India. And they were all in peace. So it is that Joel 3:6 says, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Greeks, or the Europeans, that you might remove them far from their border. Okay, so one of the reasons that Joel says that they sold them as slaves is to remove them from their border. Okay, that seems straight up. Whoever was sold as slaves? Well, what comes to mind here in America when we think about that in our history is the black African slaves that were sold at the slave coast and brought to America. Now, remember, this didn't just happen in 1800, 1776 or whatever. It happened for years, hundreds of years before that. And you have places, France and Germany and Portuguese and all these other different countries were doing it for years. And many of them were being taken to the islands off the coast of Brazil. Many people in Brazil are populated with them. But Spain, as we said, was part of this area where the Berbers ruled, and they were mostly Judaic of faith and probably of genetics. And they were very powerful, and they were very valiant in war, and they fought off the Europeans at the border between France and Spain. But in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and he took, supposedly, mostly all of these names that we have in Mexico, Garcia, Rodriguez, and all these different, I can't think of them all right now, but there's many very common Mexican, Spanish, and Guatemalan. These names were definitely people that were removed as slaves from Spain, not just from Africa itself, because the black individuals ruled Spain until 1492. And so when Isabel wanted to take Spain, they wanted all these people removed. They wanted them removed far away from their borders. We know that they were Judaic and that they had Judaic beliefs. And they were put on boats. And Columbus then didn't necessarily just take his own fellow brothers. A lot of the individuals that he took, and Columbus may have been Jewish too, but I think, and I'm certain, he was more of the Ashkenazi, not of the Sephardic Jews that had been there for years. But he was sent down there from the Holy Roman Empire to take it over, and then take these African peoples that were in Spain, and he removed them to these islands from Brazil all the way up to Cuba and all the way along through Florida and stuff. There were many blacks that were in the area around Louisiana and Florida and Virginia and Georgia and all of this. There were a lot of black people already here long before the Pilgrims ever got here. They actually lived here for hundreds of years. But they were sold here, and for the reason to remove them far from their border. Remember, the area we call Spain was originally called the Iberian Peninsula, or the Hebrew Peninsula. We can prove that that does mean Hebrew. Lots of the names are going back to the biblical times, Saxons is Isaac's sons. We have the British, which is, Ish is man in Hebrew, and Brit is covenant, so the covenant man. We have many different names. We've said that Dan went up there. Now, also remember that the children of Israel were 12 different tribes. They had 4 different mothers, and they were all different colors. They didn't think of them in terms of color. They thought of them in terms of tribes. They didn't have some kind of prejudice against color in the biblical times. You never or ever see anywhere in the Bible or ancient works where they cared anything one whit about your color. The New Testament has black individuals that were helpers of Paul, of the elders of the 72, where some of them were black. It mentions them in the Bible. I'm not going to go into that right here. We've done that before. But it just wasn't a racial thing in the sense that it is become today because of this, agenda that we have in the world today. So America was originally populated with these slaves. They were made slaves by some Ashkenazi type Jews that came in there and wanted to eradicate them. And as I've said before, why would they do that? Well, they're not the same. They're not the same people, because there was a group of people that went to France from the lineage of Mary Magdalene and Lazarus from the 72 that got on the boat. They spread from the Languedoc of the southern France all the way up the Rhine to Paris. And when the Inquisition of the Waldensian Inquisition occurred, they then were pushed out mostly into Spain and Africa. And so there they were on the slave coasts of Africa, all the way up to Spain, the Iberian Peninsula. And this prophecy was fulfilled, Joel 3:6. This was one of the great prophecies that we can see right before our eyes fulfilled. We've been talking about the tribe of Dan that went up to Germany, they went to Japan, they went all around the world. And they took with them other remnants of their tribes. Now, it says, it is in Judah that the colonizers built the door of no return, the physical gate through which the tribes of Levi and Judah passed into slavery and into the land of their enemies. According to Psalms 83, the captors of Jacob knew who they were enslaving, according to Psalms 83. And the name of this man-made gate reveals the intention to ensure that there would be no return. Africa was at one time known to the ancient world as Ethiopia. And the South Atlantic Ocean is really the Ethiopic Ocean. Subsequently, it has become evident after so long that one major objective for slavery was to remove the Hebrews from their lands and so cut them off from being a nation. But the Most High has a controversy with that intention when he says, "And say unto them that thus saith the Lord deity, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen where they have gone, and I will gather them on every side and bring them into their own land." Friends, I believe if you continue to read this, and we've read prophecies all throughout the Bible before, especially in Isaiah, where their own land, or where they are to be gathered in the latter days, is to Mount Zion, which is America beyond the rivers of Ethiopia or the ocean or the Atlantic Ocean. Here's some pictures of some Moors that were from Spain that were rulers, had, some kind of heraldry and royal bloodlines. If you had heraldry, these particular symbols that you see, kind of like up in Britain, you see all these shields and heraldry and this kind of thing, that was how you kept track of your bloodline. So these could be traced just from the symbols and the heraldry. These are royal family lines, and you can see clearly they were black individuals. The British families, top left, the Moors of Yorkshire, including Sir Thomas More, Chancellor of Henry VIII. The others are from the Fairbairn Book of Crests, Fox, Davies, Amaral families. So many of these individuals, before it became the end thing to be racist in this modern agenda, they were very powerful people in Europe in the days when France was very powerful. I thought this was an interesting picture. Not even really sure where that picture came from. But that's America. That's what America looked like before 1776. And that's what America did to people like Columbus when they got here on their boats. That looks a little bit like, it's probably Columbus or somebody, I don't know. Here's some more coat of arms, heraldry, which shows their royal lineage back to the royal bloodlines of Judah. Here's one showing more coat of arms, Nicodemus, Della Scala, Herman Gilly. They've got the Dagon Pope mitre there that they're wearing. They were quite royal individuals. Down the bottom right and the bottom left, you see the mitre that the Pope wears. They got six-sided stars on their shields. And this is an interesting read, to say the least. It's called Our Remote Ancestry. And it says, at the time when the Hamitic Berbers, remember that's in Spain, were gaining possession, they overran the Spanish peninsula, founded cities, built a navy, carried on commerce, extended their empire over the countries that later were known as Gaul and Britain, held Italy as Sicanians, where Rome was founded, long before the sack of Troy, and from Italy passed into Sicily as early as 2000 BC. Here they were, we'll find out who these people are, here they were disturbed by Pelasgians, while along the Mediterranean shore Aryan Ligures penetrated to the Pyrenees and beyond. By sea they were invaded by the Tyro-Carthaginians, and after a naval battle succumbed. By land they were tormented by the Ligures and Gauls. By 1000 BC, the Phoenicians possessed the greater part of Spain. The Basques are the only existing remnant of the Iberian people, and they are extensively Gallicized. Their language, says Whitney, possessed some affinities with those American family, which is ethnically Mongoloid, but their cranial characters approach the type of the Guanches and Berbers, which is Hamitic. The Pelasgi Empire was at its meridian as early as 2500 BC. Now, this people came from the islands of the Aegean and more remotely from Asia Minor. They were originally a branch of the sub-burnt Hamitic stock, or black race, that laid the basis of civilization in Canaan and Mesopotamia. Friends, the Canaanites were probably black, and they probably laid the foundation for civilization, as it's saying here. We were talking yesterday about the certain Greeks that were there, and these Dorians came in and overran them, and today we have philosophy and democracy and Athens, and all of this goes back to the Spartans, which goes back to the Dorians, which goes back to one of the tribes of Israel, which is from Dan, and they mixed with Judah, and they brought some Levites, and this is Samson. So you have to watch that video yesterday to get an idea what I'm saying. But we talked about the Cyclops, which were the wall builders. Well, we also talked about how there were different kinds of Greeks, and the Dorians came in and overran them and basically took them over, and that's what we have as the Macedonian kings that became Ptolemies, and the Antioch Epiphany kings in the Syrian area. They became much whiter, but they were originally a dark race. This is destined later to be Semitized. Danos, and that's the tribe of Dan, and his daughters, that is, the fugitive shepherds from Egypt. Now, what they're talking about when they say shepherds in quotes is a thing called the Hyksos that ruled over Egypt for some period of time. People don't know who they were. Where they were Israelites that went through the Exodus, but the dates don't match exactly because there were more than one Exodus. The one with Moses happened in 1300 BC or somewhere around there. But Dan, the Danu tribe that mixed with Judah, had left on boats before that and founded Troy and stuff, like I said, around 1700 BC, which was before 1300 BC. But when they got there were already people there. And these had already built the Mycenaean civilization. And it appears that these were Hamitic stock. And Dan came in there and they had wars, and many of them assimilated as well. But they sought refuge among their Hamitic kindred in the Peloponnesus. Now remember, Peloponnesus is where Dorian or Samson went. So when they got there, they must have been, the people that they warred with may have been from Hamitic stock. 300 years before these Pelasgians had learned the art of weaving and agriculture from the Aryan immigrants. And they use this word Aryan in a more modern sense. The word Aryan actually means all human beings in this age of man, but they're using it in terms of the Indo-European Aryan race that they've coined today. In time, they occupied the whole of Greece and Thessaly. Before 200 BC, they established themselves in Italy, and after reverses and Aryan subjugation, founded a latter empire 900 to 974 BC, known as the Etruscans, which extended north beyond the Po. Rome itself was Pelasgian from the 14th century to 428 BC, but in Italy and in Greece, the Hamitic stock was displaced and absorbed by Aryan, as in Asia it had been by Semitic. The European branch of the Aryans crossed the Urals and the Volga about 2500 BC and occupied southern Russia till 1500 BC. They brought into Europe a knowledge of gold, silver, and bronze, as well as the plow and the loom. In process of time, they ramified into Thraco-Illyrio-Ligures, Greco-Italian Celts, and Slavo-Germans, Thracian fortunes in Asia Minor. So, now, look at this. I'm just reading this. Random places on Pinterest. I don't even know what this is. It says Riddles of Prehistoric Times by James Anderson. And it says the Iberians, which is Spain, in ancient times inhabited the western and southern part of Europe. The northern part of Africa, in fact, all parts reached from the Mediterranean Sea. The Basques in Spain and France, the little dark Welshmen, the Scotch and black Celts to the west of the Shannon River in Ireland, as well as the same kind of men in Brittany and the Aquitaine in France, the Ganges of the Canary Islands, and the Berbers in Africa are all probably the remnants of that race. The Teuton inhabited the country north of the Iberians. He was phlegmatic in temperament and dull of intellect, but brave, warlike, and given to athletic exercises. He was a flaxen-haired, large-limbed giant, fat and stupid. His greatest story was to have killed a large number of savage animals. Owing to their strength, bravery, and size, they were a conquering race, but did not have the genius to rule the lands that they conquered. They did not develop high civilization of their own. They were self-reliant, willful, and independent. The intellect and genius of the people of Central Europe came from the people further north, probably the original Aryan tribes. Their deities were Thor, Odin, Frigga, wife of Odin, and Woden, and the Balder. Well, these individuals, the Aryan tribes that they're talking about, are these northern Germanic tribes, which are from Dan. And we've talked till we're blue in the face about this tribe from Dan that went and displaced all these people and set up these laws from Moses and went all the way to Japan, conquered Europe, conquered all of the Macedonian, the Iberian peoples, Africa, and all of these areas. It's pretty interesting how they displaced these individuals the way they did. Now, we talked about before how after Julius Caesar became emperor, and subsequently Augustus and Nero and all the rest, and then the Flavians, and then this went into the Roman Catholic Church. But from the days of Jesus on, this Roman Julian Empire was good to start with. And they were literally there to protect and keep peace. You read the story of Julius Caesar, how he was going to battle all the time with these Vikings, and he called them barbarians. And so I believe what we've got here is two different groups from Israel that have some of Dan in them. You've got the Greco-Troy line, which is Samson, which has got Dan and Judah and Levi. And then you've got the latter group of these Vikings that had Dan, Asher, Naphtali, and some Levites and others in their mix. And they went all the way to Japan and came back through Asia, massacring and genociding basically the world, setting up their laws, which is where we get lawyers and so forth. Because though the Celts and these good guys originally were up in Britain and Iberian Peninsula, the Vikings moved in and murdered them. So they had wars, and after Julius Caesar left, hundreds of years later, the Vikings began to win, and they took Lundan and named that after themselves, and Dan's Mark, and this is where they established their kingdom, and they basically drove the Druids out. They went down further into Spain and all the way down through there and began to massacre and murder and conquer a lot of them. But they didn't take them completely out until we get to the days of the Holy Roman Empire with the Inquisitions and finally when Columbus took them to Brazil and America and Florida. And so, in many cases, because of the laws of Moses, when they would go in and they saw Canaanites or any of these individuals that really were of the Melchizedek high priesthood line, in their ignorance, many times they would committed genocide. And this is what they did because of the law of Moses. But remember, that's not even really the law of Moses, because Moses went at Mount Horeb and got these pronouncements of El, which are love, and the people there rejected it. And they adopted these teachings of Satan, which is this fallen angel. But I don't want to go into that again today. I'm just showing you several testimonies about the indigenous peoples of the world and how they were displaced by Dan, and in this colonization effort, they did some terrible things. Dan appears to have been quite white, Caucasian. He seems to be the ones that went over the Caucasus Mountains. Remember, the one who got the promise was Joseph, and Joseph got a coat of many colors. Joseph is the one who married the Canaanite queen, Asenath. And so our Heavenly Father loves all of these people and is one day going to bring them together in a place called Zion, beyond the rivers or the ocean of Ethiopia or the Atlantic, to the place called Zion they shall return. Well, guys, I have gone so far over, I just can't go anymore. I'll never get this thing loaded, but I probably will do a little more on this, and we'll talk more about China and Africa and Japan and different, India and different places around the world and Brazil. I did have in mind to show you a little bit more. There's some old maps of Africa that show cities like Jerusalem and all the people we, familiar names that are all down there. So they have most undoubtedly, when they went there, named all of these places after the places they had been originally. And we don't know where those original places, such as Jerusalem, may have been. We said it's probably Heliopolis. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful evening, guys. May the Lord bless you, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.